All right, guys, welcome to Great American Conflicts wrap-up here. Got through the nonsense, the opening of school and all the other things. This is a quick 10-15 minute recap of where we were at. This gentleman here is Thomas Jefferson, writer of the Declaration of Independence. And in one of those great lines he wrote in that beautiful document is, "Governments can only rule by the consent of the governed." And he and the other founding fathers will rebel because they didn't consent to the way that the English government was treating them, taxing them without representation in Parliament. Thomas's problem is, while he writes that, we have the institution of slavery in the United States. And Thomas writes, we have the wolf by the ears. We can neither hold him or safely let him go. And the institution that he's talking about is slavery. What should we do about it? And it comes up at the signing of the Declaration, where there is an argument that if striking slavery is left in, then William Rutledge and the Southern delegates won't sign it. So it's decided, let's win independence from England first and then worry about the institution of slavery. Also in 1776, Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations says that slavery is the dumbest institution possible. It is a waste of capital and resources. Everyone should be moving towards industry as the Industrial Revolution has happened. Invest in shipping and in factories and in canals, not in like feudalistic slavery. And so the Revolutionary War is won, and it's decided in the Constitution that it does not take a strong stand against slavery. Slavery is legal, all right? We have the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution about protecting someone's property. But after the Revolution, the Northwest Territories are added, the Northwest Ordinance, which increases the Great Lakes states, full of iron ore, coal, bauxite, lumber, industrial materials along the Great Lakes, but they prohibit slavery. Slavery is not allowed there. It's state law, states' rights, stay out. And so it's decided that the next time the United States will acquire territory, that territory should go to the slave owners. And as we move on towards history at the Constitution, it was also decided that slavery should die out in about 20 years. The government really doesn't need to do anything. The problem will take care of itself. And as we get closer to 1800, slavery is dying. There's like 697 or so thousand slaves. Profitability is decreasing. Cash crops, cotton and tobacco are hard on the soil, and their crop yields are declining. But Sam Slater and Eli Whitney, their mechanical inventions, especially Eli Whitney, who invents the cotton gin, to have a simple machine pull the seeds and straighten out the cotton fibers, allows you to extract cotton seeds 50 times faster than by hand. And overnight, slavery becomes profitable again, and it's big business. And while that is happening, President Thomas Jefferson will make the greatest land deal ever when he will purchase from Napoleon the Louisiana Purchase, from modern day Louisiana all the way up into Montana, 850,000 square miles. We doubled the size of the country for around $15 million. But with this addition of territory comes trouble. Slaves weren't allowed up here, so slaves are supposed to get all of this. And so it gets intense when the state of Missouri applies for statehood. At the time in Congress, the northern industrialists and the southern plantation owners were vying for power. Who would determine the economic future of the country? Well, slave owners had moved into Missouri. When they applied for statehood, it could upset the even balance of slave state and free state. And there's a lot of trouble brewing until Henry Clay, whom I liken as America's duct tape, the short-term fix. If you got a leaky radiator hose, you put duct tape on it. It'll get you to a mechanic, but just barely. He creates the state of Missouri and the Missouri Compromise, and to balance, he creates the state of Maine. Maine's a free state, Missouri is a slave state, and there is an equal balance. But slavery is prohibited to cross the southern border of Missouri. No slaves are allowed above the southern border of Missouri except in Missouri. Figure that one out. And it's called the 3630 line, the latitude line that runs across the country. Slavery can be below it, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, but not above it. It's a short-term solution to the big problem. And in between, we have a lot of interesting things that will happen. Mexico will invite American settlers into Texas in 1820 to get rid of the bandits and the natives and take over down there, basically. As the Texas U.S. citizens move into Texas, they get rid of the natives, they get rid of the bandits, and they build an infrastructure, and it increases tension. Slave owners moving down there. But there was a growing rivalry going on. I'm flipping back and forth here, and it is mainly between these three guys. Here we have Henry Clay, here we have Daniel Webster from Massachusetts, and here's John C. Calhoun from South Carolina. And John C. Calhoun was upset when President Andrew Jackson signed what is called the Tariff of Abominations. It raised import taxes on European goods really high to help out American businesses. You know, buy American was the saying of the day. But European ships did not come into southern ports. And Southerners, who had a lot of cotton and tobacco and indigo tied up on their docks, couldn't make any money. So John C. Calhoun, who's an old enemy of the president, writes the South Carolina Exposition and Protest, where it says that what the president of the federal government is doing is unjust. It's unconstitutional, and South Carolina is going to nullify those laws. You were simply not going to obey the federal government in our state. A theoretical right that even Thomas Jefferson, the Founding Fathers, talked about. Well, when that happens, Andrew Jackson flips his lid, and he's going to send 50,000 soldiers down to South Carolina to make sure his treaty is enforced. 10,000 South Carolina militiamen are called out, and this is 1832. It looks like the war is going to start right then and there. But Daniel Webster gives a plea in the Senate, and Henry Clay comes up with a solution that allows the tariffs to be slowly lowered down until they disappear pretty much altogether. Andrew Jackson can say he enforced tariffs on the Europeans. John C. Calhoun can say he backed the president down, and we have averted war. It's another temporary fix. At the same time, there's a series of slave rebellions, starting with Gabriel Prosser in 1800 in and around Richmond, Virginia, where he encouraged slaves to rise up and kill their masters. Gabriel's slave rebellion is thwarted, and Thomas Jefferson tells then Governor and friend James Monroe, don't hang them, you'll make a martyr out of them. And going up onto the hangman's noose, some of Gabriel and his slaves gave a George Washington quote, that they have endeavored their entire lives to secure liberty for their countrymen, and their life is a willing sacrifice in that cause. 20 so years later, Denmark Vesey in South Carolina tries to lead a rebellion very similar to Gabriel's, but he and his armed slaves were going to kill their masters and escape down to Haiti, where the famous Toussaint L'Ouverture had led his slave rebellion. It too is thwarted. But in the South, people are afraid of these slave rebellions, and they're taking away, the few privileges that the slaves had. And it comes to a head with the famous Nat Turner Rebellion in 1831, right as Calhoun and Andrew Jackson are dealing with a tariff of abominations. The slave prophet Nat Turner sees an eclipse, and he rises up in August of 1831, and he murders the Travis family, and he collects 60 followers who are terrorizing the Virginia countryside until they begin to get drunk, and their continuity breaks down, and they're easy pickings for the Virginia militia. And Nat Turner and his men are all hanged. And Thomas Jefferson said, God forbid we should go 20 years without a little rebellion. Shake things up. Make the government listen to you. Well, no one envisioned these rebellions. And the Southerners begin to say, why are you guys bothering us? Things were fine until you began to meddle. But there's the growing movement in the North. The Underground Railroad is working with, Harriet Tubman and the Oberlin, College, secreting slaves out of the Deep South to their freedom in Canada. And then Harriet Beecher Stowe, young, educated lady, leaves New England, lives for a time in Cincinnati where she can see slaves across the river in Kentucky. She comes back to Bowdoin University in Maine, and she writes her book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And in the book, the hero of the book, Uncle Tom, will just, be sold from his master, where he was the overseer of the plantation, to a succeedingly more brutal and savage group of slave masters, until he is beaten by an evil, drunken man named Simon Legree. And as Uncle Tom is laying beaten and dying in a barn, the young boy who called Uncle Tom, the slave master's youngest son, had spent 20 years looking for him. He was trying to find his friend and buy his freedom. When he finds him, Uncle Tom dies. And people freak out when they read this book. It took an issue that was economic or maybe political or for some social, and you read that Uncle Tom died. Oh no, it's like, oh my God, Snape killed Dumbledore. Well, that was nothing compared to the emotion of Uncle Tom dying in the arms. And so people become emotionally attached. But the problem is, Harriet Beecher Stowe never said the book was a work of fiction. And that book further and further divides the issue of slavery between North and South. Going back to William Lloyd Garrison publishing his newspaper, The Liberator. Angelina and Sarah Grimke, South Carolina slave-owning daughters who joined the abolition circuit. David Walker, African-American man, writes an essay light years ahead of its time, calling for equality for women, Native Americans, and freed slaves. A lot of Dr. Martin Luther King ideas are in that speech, and it was in the 1830s. These guys had support, the abolition movement, but it's nothing like Harriet writing that book. Now it's on everybody's radar. It becomes deeply, deeply emotional. And this leads to back to Texas, where John O'Sullivan said, "Go west, young man," in the 1840s. It's America's destiny, or our manifest destiny, rather, to control from the Atlantic to the Pacific. We're going to get this land anyway. And after the Spanish government in Mexico invited Stephen Austin and 20,000 Americans to come into Texas with their slaves to build infrastructure and get rid of the bandits, after 10 or 12 years of doing this and building a new civilization, the government in Spain through Mexico wanted to tax it. And Stephen Austin goes down to negotiate independence, gets thrown in jail, and it kicks off the Battle of the Alamo, where eventually Sam Houston will imprison, capture Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto. The problem is, the victory adds more territory. Not only does the United States eventually get Texas, but the entire American Southwest, in what will be known as the Mexican War, which is where we will pick up the war with Mexico, Winfield Scott, Zachary Taylor, and Robert E. Lee, which is where we will pick up the next recap. So that's where we're at, the first 8-9 days of Great American Conflicts. Hope you're enjoying it. Ask me any questions if you have them. And there's the bell. It's time to go.